Namaste. My name is Kirti, and on behalf of Himalayan Yoga Association, I welcome you all to this online teacher training course. I am a teacher here at Himalayan Yoga Association, and I will be taking you through the concepts and details of the human body and yoga altogether. Let's hope you enjoy this course. Let's start.
Namaste and welcome back to the online yoga teacher training course. In this video today, we are going to discuss the anatomy and the structure of the human spine, all the connections, whatever there is that becomes the spine as a whole, everything that you need to know about the spine. But before we go ahead and do that, I would request you to come and chant the Gayatri mantra with me, how we always do before the beginning of every session. So, come sit straight. Lengthen your spine, roll your shoulders to the back, tilt your head backwards in line with the spine, and finally close your eyes after activating a mudra with your hands. Rest them on your knees and close your eyes in complete silent observation of your breath. Take slow, deep and complete inhalations and try to spend twice as much time on every exhalation that you make. After a few deep breaths, slowly bring your hands in front of your chest in Namaskara Sthiti. Touch the heart center with the back of your thumbs. And if you know the mantra, you can chant it with me. Otherwise, you can repeat it afterwards. Slowly breathe in once. Om Bhur Bhuvah Swaha Tatsavetur Varenyam Bhargo Devasya Dhimahi Dhiyo Yo Nah Prachodayat. Having absorbed the vibration and effect of the mantra, let's generate some energy between our palms by rubbing our hands against each other. And after you feel this energy, you can transfer this energy to your eyes first. Cover your eyes with your palms. Then massage your face. Transfer this energy to your face. And anywhere else you wish to transfer this energy to. Finally, before you open your eyes, once again fold your palms, bow down to your fingertips and the universal truth. With a few blinks, come back and open your eyes. Welcome back. So today we are going to figure out the anatomy and the structure of the human spine. The human spine is a very interesting structure. It is made up of a lot of irregular bones coming together to form the entire structure of the spine. If you pay attention to the entire bony structure as well the shape of the spine, you'll understand how the creator is really an artist, because even though these spinal vertebrae, these vertebral columns, each one of them is very irregular shaped in nature individually, but each and every hole, each and every space, each and every canal inside these vertebrae, it has a meaning and a very important purpose to the entire spine as it is. Let's move on to the structure as it is. If you'll pay attention over here, then the entire spinal column has a lot of curves on it. These curves are referred to as lordosis and kyphosis. The entire spine is well balanced, it's stable because of this natural curve on the spine starting from the top, ending at the tailbone as it is. The human vertebrae is made up of 24 vertebral columns plus the sacrum as well as the coccyx bone, which is also referred to as the tailbone of the spine. The sacrum as well is a combination of a few bones coming together but fused together. even though the sacrum does not really play much bigger role in stabilizing or in supporting the human vertebrae, but it is the connection between the pelvic bones on either side of the pelvic girdle. The tailbone, though, the very small region in the end, the tailbone is again a fused combination of many vertebrae, which is bigger in size when a newly born child is born. Eventually, as we age, as the human skeletal system develops, as the size increases of an adult, the tailbone itself, it starts decomposing inside the body and almost vanishes by the time you reach complete adulthood. There are 7 different vertebrae as the cervical part of the spine. The entire vertebrae can be divided into 3 different portions: cervical, thoracic, and lumbar. The ones which are individual and function individually but together as well. In other words, the bones of the vertebrae which are not fused together, they are 24 in number. 7 in the cervical vertebrae, which has a lordosis curve. The lordosis curve is the reverse C-shaped curve, which means that the curve is bending towards the front. There are 12 vertebrae in the thoracic part of spine, which is kyphosis, the opposite of the lordosis effect. In other words, a true C, so to say, which is a complete opposite to the reverse C-shaped cervical column. Again, afterwards, there are 5 different vertebrae on the lumbar part of the spine, which follows the lordosis curve. And again, in the kyphosis part, the kyphosis curve, you have the sacrum as well as the coccyx region of the spine. We are not going to discuss much about the sacrum and the coccyx spine, but let's figure out what the functions, how the entire vertebral column, the 24 bones of the vertebral column give us the purpose, the function, and the stature that we walk around with. So each one of these vertebrae is named after the initial of the category that they fall in. For instance, the cervical part of the spine, all the vertebrae, all 7 vertebrae of the cervical part of spine are referred to as C1, C2, C3, C4, C5, C6 and C7. 7 vertebrae, 7 names, C1 to C7 and everything in between. Similarly, the thoracic vertebrae are referred to as T1 to T12 and everything in between. On the same lines, the lumbar vertebrae is referred to as L1 to L5 and everything in between. There are no unique names given to the sacrum as well as the coccyx because they are fused together. They do not really need an individual identity as such, except for the names that they have, sacrum and coccyx or the tailbone. Amongst the entire vertebral column, you will find that the top 2 vertebrae of the spine, they have unique names apart from these code names as C1, C2, C3. Apart from these names, only the top 2 vertebrae of the spine have unique names. That's because they have their own unique functions to perform as a part of the human vertebrae. The top bone or C1 bone of the human vertebrae is also referred to as the atlas bone in the human body. It gets its name from the structure or the artistic work, a Greek artistic work wherein a person is having a huge globe or he's carrying the entire weight of the entire world on the back of his head, resting it right here. So the point where he's resting the world is called atlas. Why? Because in a way, in a very metaphoric way, our entire head, the entire world, how we perceive it, rests and lives inside our head. The way we see things, the way we smell things, the way we taste things, the way we touch things in a way, the way we perceive things, the way we interact with things, the way we sense things, all of the 5 senses that we have, without these 5 senses, the entire environment that we live around in would lose a lot of color and a lot of meaning to it. And that is why, because the atlas bone is the first connection between the skull and the vertebrae, it is referred to as the atlas bone, because the atlas bone has the weight of the entire world on itself. The second bone, which is called the axis bone, is pretty easy to understand. Now, the axis bone is also the most special bone inside the entire vertebrae. That's because it has a very unique knob, a very pointed thing moving in the upward direction towards the superior end, and that knob fits perfectly into the atlas bone. If you pay attention over here, you'll see that the atlas bone, which is the entire vertebrae in itself, this is the superior view of these vertebrae, has a complete huge ring to it, while as the axis bone has a small a bony knob which is moving upwards and fits perfectly into this huge ring of the atlas bone. Through this, it's able to maintain a connection with the atlas bone, or in other words, we can say through this single knob, imagine this is the axis bone and this is the atlas bone, and it just fits perfectly right here, and through this it's able to lock into the entire head because the atlas is the connection between the skull and the axis. So, with the help of the axis bone, with the help of C2, the head is able to perform all of these movements, these rotations that the neck is capable of. In other words, we can also say that the axis bone is having a pivot joint, a pivot synovial joint, through which the head is able to move in left and right rotations. Apart from that, because the head is also, the entire vertebral column is a complete plane joint or a gliding joint, it is able to perform various movements like extensions, flexions, adductions, abductions, and circumductions as a combination of more than 2 or 3 vertebrae coming together to perform their specific function. But only and only the atlas bone is capable to provide the rotation on one axis. That is why it's called as the axis bone. The first 2 bones are having unique functions. Apart from that, all of these vertebrae, they have their own unique and common functions to them. Let's figure out what they have. Now, if you pay the attention here, then the cervical part of the spine is also the most interesting part of the spine. Each vertebrae has a huge hole common to them, a space in between. Apart from the protrudements, irregular shapes, it has a very huge place common to them, which fits into, as the entire spine locks in with each other, this space is continuous as well. This canal-like space which is running from C1 and ending up at L5 is called as the spinal canal. This spinal canal is where the entire spinal cord fits in and sits comfortably and is well protected inside because of the structure and how these vertebrae are placed against each other as such. On the other hand, you'll see that there is also these 2 small holes on either side of the cervical column, the cervical vertebrae. These holes are also called as transverse foramen. These transverse foramens are very vital and very important because this is where the arteries running across the human body are able to supply the blood from the heart to the brain, considering it's the closest to the entire head, and the head is the farthest away from the heart in a way, with limited muscles and limited supply, limited space to run through all of these different arteries and capillaries from the heart. It is with the help of these foramens right here, there's one right here and this one right here, it is these arteries are passing through these foramens and reaching up the head, supplying a very rich supply of blood. But these foramens are only common in the cervical vertebrae. The thoracic as well as the lumbar spine do not have these foramens because they are comparatively closer to the entire heart cavity as such, to the entire rib cage as such. Now, another thing that you need to pay attention to is that the L5, the lumbar spine as well as the cervical spine are most common to each other in a way. They are both having the lordosis curve, the lordosis part of the spine, the posture, lordosis. While the kyphosis part, which is the thoracic as well as the sacrum and the coccyx region, is well supported with a more set of bones surrounding these vertebrae. In case of the thoracic part of the spine, if you're aware the number of vertebrae, the number of ribs in the rib cage, then you'll realize that there are exactly 12 ribs connecting to the chest or connecting to the entire spine, and these thoracic part of the spine is the reason why there are 12 different ribs in the rib cage, because these T1 to T12 and all the bones in between provide support, provide structure, and provide functioning to the entire thoracic part of the spine. The second thing that I wanted to bring to your attention was that the cervical as well as the lumbar part of the spine are most common in structure, are most common in function as well, because the same way the lumbar spine is not having any support, any structure as compared to the thoracic part of the spine or the sacrum and the coccyx part of the spine, these lumbar vertebrae, they work individually on their own, and they only have to rely on their own stability to provide the function and to be able to balance the weight that the body is lending upon themselves. Similarly, the neck area is responsible for handling the entire weight of the head. Now, if you're aware of the weight of the head, then you'll realize that the human head, an adult human being, can have a head which weighs approximately 4 to 5 kgs for an average person. Just the entire weight of these 4 to 5 kgs is handled very freely, very perfectly with the cervical spines. Similarly, the entire weight of the human body, which is the entire weight of the torso, which can be almost about 50 to 60% of the entire body weight, is handled very well by the lumbar part of the spine. The thoracic part of the spine is the most stable part of the spine because it has those rib cages which are attached to the entire structure of the spine, and at the same time, even though these rib cages, the entire rib cage gives the entire thoracic part of the spine a lot of stability, a lot of strength, a lot of structure as such, but also at the same time the thoracic part of the spine is the area which gets the least mobility or the least movement. If you have paid attention to what extent can you move your body whenever you're doing Uttanasana or full forward bends, you'll realize that the thoracic part of the spine usually stays the most stable, offering minimum movement, that too because of the limitations of the cartilage structure around the rib cage protruding from the sternum, and of course the cartilaginous structure or the vertebrae. The lumbar part of the spine does not have the limitation of the entire rib cage, and that is why it's able to move more freely in all directions. Front, back, left, right, it's able to glide freely because it does not have the limitation of the entire rib cage. Another important thing that you need to understand about the lumbar spine, if you'll pay attention over here, this is not exactly what the lumbar spine looks like, but it's quite close. It's not that bad at drawing as well. You'll see that the vertebral body of the lumbar spine is comparatively bigger than the cervical or the thoracic part of the spine. As the spine is evolving away from the head, the vertebral columns of the vertebral spine, they grow bigger, thicker in size, and that makes sense because the lumbar part of the spine handles a lot of body weight on itself, and that is the reason why the vertebral body of the entire vertebrae needs to be bigger so that it can support the body weight stronger. In other words, we can say that even though the lumbar part of the spine is the most unstable portion of the entire spine, but at the same time, it is also the strongest part of the entire spinal vertebrae. If we talk about the spinal cord, which runs from the entire head and down towards the human body, which is also the network through which the entire body is connected to the head, then the spinal cord finishes up until L2. After that, it moves into a set of branching nerves which reaches the tips and ends of the legs, the hips, and the entire pelvic region. These branching nerves are also called as having a structure like a horse's tail. And apart from that, before that, the entire vertebral column up until L2 is having the spinal cord running from the head until the L2 part of the spine. Now, another important thing that you need to understand and need to realize as yogis is that each one of these vertebrae is obviously very well connected with the help of the unique structure of these vertebrae. They are meant to fit on top of each other no matter what happens. They are so nicely fitted, even though they are so irregular shaped, but they create such an interesting and artistic, perfect for the spinal vertebrae on top and at the bottom, one way or the other. They are just made for each other. But they also get this function, this stability and the movement with the help of intervertebral disc, which is present between every two spines running across the entire length of the spinal column. Each one of these spinal vertebrae up until L5 has intervertebral discs between them. These intervertebral discs are basically the reason why the spine is able to absorb shocks, why the spine is able to glide so freely in all directions. That's because these intervertebral discs, they're not made up of bones, they are made up of fibrous cartilage, and that is the reason why they are able to squeeze whenever it comes down to bearing more weight from the top, or they're able to glide or shift the weight in either direction depending upon the type of movement you're making. If you pay attention over here, you'll see that every one of this intervertebral disc is quite thick in nature. It's comparatively thicker than the articular cartilage present between bones. And at the same time, it has two portions. The outer portion is fibrous and cartilaginous in nature. That is called as Annulus Fibrosis. Among the entire ring of the Annulus Fibrosis, there is a very spongy gel-like structure which is not really completely liquidy in nature, but it has its own texture, it has its own strength, and it is the most vital part of the entire intervertebral disc. This inside this nucleus of the entire intervertebral disc, this gel-like structure which is spongy in nature is called as Nucleus Pulposus. This Nucleus Pulposus is actually the most vital part of the entire intervertebral disc, because this is the area which is able to absorb shocks, which is able to absorb any weight being shifted around, and this is what is able to balance the body weight one above the other between all of these vertebrae. And as a coordination of the intervertebral disc, one above the other, nicely placed above each and every one of them, stacked on top of these vertebrae, they are able to provide us with a lifelong stability, balance and function of the spine. Anytime, usually, most of the times, people who ever complain of lower back pain, which is the most common thing, which is also very obvious to understand, because the lumbar spine does not really have the stability of the thoracic spine, or the less weight of the head in case of the cervical spine. Most of the times, people who start experiencing lower back pain happens in the area of the lumbar part of the spine. And in those cases, the intervertebral disc is what has started receiving damage. If you are at a stage where you have already started complaining about lower back pain, then that pain is probably happening in the lumbar part of the spine, irrespective of whether you have had an accident related to it. If you had an accident, then naturally there could be a different kind of damage, but something which happens because of age. As you grow older and older, the body grows weaker, the functions slow down. On the same lines, the annulus and the nucleus pulposus, namely together called as the intervertebral disc, starts losing its density, starts losing its structure, starts losing its functionality.
The annulus fibrosus is the part which starts getting the most damage because it is surrounding and protecting the internal nucleus pulposus. The first thing that will happen in that case is that the fibrous structure of the annulus fibrosus will start rupturing apart. It will start developing cracks around it because it will start drying up as you age, and because of this, the gel-like structure will start moving out from the center and inside the body, and it will eventually move out, which means that the spongy structure, which is also being well protected by the annulus fibrosus, is not contained completely inside, as a result of which the space between these vertebrae starts decreasing, and the very perfectly stacked vertebrae, one on top of each other, they start grinding against each other, which eventually, if you do not take care of, can do much more damage than just experiencing lower back pain. For example, there are n number of nerves running out from the spinal cord, which is well protected inside this vertebral column, or this vertebral spinal canal. These columns are having a lot of nerves moving out. Each one of these hinges that you see on either sides, these projections moving outside, has space for different nerves, different veins, different arteries, different capillaries running from the head, running from the heart, reaching in every tip and corner of the entire human body. They will start experiencing breakage and damages as soon as the coordination between the entire spine is disturbed. Now realize this, anytime you may have come across some people who experience injuries related to the spine, and that can, in the most severe cases, that can result in problems such as permanent paralysis of the lower body or even of the entire body as such. Why so? Because in those intense accidents, the spinal cord or the nerves which are branching out from the spinal cord and reaching out, connecting different body parts, have experienced damage, and they are not connected to the brain at all, which means that you will not be able to give and receive sensations from these vertebrae, from these different branching nerves out of the spine, in return damaging the entire body as it is. So maintaining a healthy intervertebral disc is the first thing that you need to keep in mind whenever it comes to experiencing a healthy spinal vertebrae. Between these vertebral columns, these projections on either side, which are moving in all directions, in each directions, they are also very vital for the entire shape and structure of the human being, because this is the area where all the ligaments, where all the muscles, where all the tendons are connecting the entire spine to the connecting part or the surrounding area of the human body. These are the projections where these ligaments, tendons and muscles, they hold on and maintain the structure and function and the mobility that the spine is able to perform with all of these.
Now, this is everything you need to know about the spine as per the course. Of course, there are more details associated with the spine. There are more details about the different names of the structures of the spine, the ligaments, the tendons that form the entire structure and help spine function the way it does. But for now, this information should be enough for you to understand the functioning of the spine. I hope you found today's video informative. I will come again next time. Until then, thank you and namaste.